Hey folks, this is Kalani. Patch 12.1 was just revealed and it includes a massive round of class changes, buffs and nerfs, with a handful of classes or specs getting completely reworked. Some of those reworks are for classes that have already been reworked multiple times over the course of Season 1, while others are finally getting some updates after an entire season of stagnation. So we're going to go over all of those updates in detail. We also have some quick updates for the live game and patch 12.07, including changes to how rare spawns work. The Umbral Champion achievement mount has finally been revealed, and you may be able to gear up even faster if you've been holding on to your bonus rolls. There's a lot to talk about, so let's break it all down in this week's WoW News video. Now before we jump in, be sure to hit up that like button and subscribe so you never miss another video. Let's kick things off with the huge class changes coming in patch 12.1. The dev team has a few goals in mind with most of these changes. They want to reduce the overall throughput of most major cooldowns while increasing the damage you deal with your standard rotation. So you shouldn't see as many big damage spikes when you have your cooldowns up, which may be less fun for quite a few classes, but your overall damage should be more reliable, especially for the classes that relied heavily on their damage during cooldowns to carry their overall throughput. To that end, several classes and specs have some big changes, and a few of them are getting completely reworked. For Blood Death Knight, Permafrost was buffed up to provide a shield for 50% of damage dealt, up from 40%. Voracious now grants 15% leech, up from 12%. Relish in Blood Healing was increased by 25%. Rapid Decomposition increases Blood Plague healing by 85%, up from 50%. Sanguinary Burst heals you for 18% of damage dealt, up from 15%. And Umbilicus Eternus was buffed up to 6 times damage dealt by Blood Plague, up from 5 times. So a lot of buffs to blood self-healing and sustain. Frost Death Knights only have one quick change for Permafrost, so that will grant a shield for 35% of damage dealt, up from 30%, so not much going on for Frost right now. Which is the total opposite for Unholy DK, who will see a lot of changes that reduce the overall number of summons that you can control at once. Reanimation has been renamed to Lord of the Dead, and its secondary effect has been redesigned, so that when you control 3 Mages of the Dead, you sacrifice them to summon a Lord of the Dead for 15 seconds, which casts bouncing frostbolts. So you reset your Mages of the Dead count whenever you reach 3, and you'll get this more powerful summon instead. The rank 3 Apex talent was updated to no longer give Mages to the Dead a stacking damage bonus for Necrotic Coil and Graveyard, and the effectiveness of Putrefy activated by Dread Plague has been increased to 100%. Soul Reaper has been updated to no longer consume charges of Putrefy, and it will instead consume up to 3 Lesser Ghoul stacks to summon them instantly. Unholy Aura has been updated, so Mages for the Dead now grants the haste buff on spawn for 15 seconds. Army of the Dead has been changed to summon or empower Lesser Ghouls to form an unholy army of 8 for 30 seconds. While active, your Scourge strikes will cause your ghouls to do something based on nearby enemies. So I guess in single target they use Death Order in order to strike your enemy, but in AoE they use Epidemic Order and explode for additional damage. Menacing Magus now also causes your Lord of the Dead's Frostbolts to chain to extra enemies. Lesser Ghoul damage was increased by 10%. Army of the Dead Lesser Ghoul damage was reduced by 20%. Necrotic Coil and Graveyard saw a 20% buff each. Commander of the Dead was nerfed down to a 10 and 20% damage bonus, down from 15 and 30. Ruptured Viscera now deals reduced damage beyond 5 targets. Players other than the Death Knight can now only see up to 3 Lesser Ghouls at a time, so they're going to cause a lot less busyness in melee, and they'll see the same Permafrost shield buff. So there's a lot going on here, but all in all, you'll have a smaller army of undead minions to do your bidding with these changes in play. Moving on to the Demon Hunters, they'll now be able to equip daggers, which is really only important for Devourer, so they can use intellect daggers moving forward. For Devourer specifically, they're going to see some huge nerfs to void meta damage throughput, and a lot of that damage is getting funneled into your basic rotation. So their Mastery's bonus damage during void meta was nerfed by 66%, which is kinda crazy, so we may see their stat priority shift quite dramatically in this next patch as well, but then all ability damage was increased by 20%. Void meta now increases Void Ray damage by 40%, down from 67%. Impending Apocalypse's Collapsing Star damage bonus was reduced to 20% per cast, down from 30%, and then Consume damage was increased by 60%, but that's not going to affect Devour. It will be interesting to see how this plays out. It should reduce the wide swings of potential damage among Devourer Demon Hunters, so you should do more damage even if you mess up your Void metas a bit, but then you won't have the crazy damage profile when you execute them perfectly, which a lot of players were really enjoying. Havoc has a few changes. The first one locks most of their core rotation to requiring Warglaives, axes, swords, and fist weapons, so even though Demon Hunters can now use daggers, Havoc actually can't. There's a new talent called Never Say Die that increases your damage while above 50% health and increases your leech while below 50% health, and Dash of Chaos has been removed. For Vengeance specifically, they also can't use daggers when using pretty much any of their main abilities. Charred Warblades was buffed up to 5% from 4%, Soul Cleave healing and Fell Devastation healing were increased by 25%, Frailty causes you to heal for 10% of damage dealt up from 8%, Feast of Souls saw a 25% buff, and Revel in Pain causes 6% of your fire damage to shield you up from 5%, so a lot of self-sustained buffs for Demon Hunter tanks as well. Druids are up next with a couple of general buffs to get us started. Matted Fur Absorb was increased by 25%, and Heart of the Wild Empowered Wild Growth Healing was buffed up by 25% too. For balanced druids, the dev team are trying to make astral power management more impactful. There's a new passive learned at level 42 that applies Stellar Flare if Moonfire or Sunfire are dispelled. Umbral Intensity has been updated to increase Wrath and Starfire damage by 10% at all times. The rank 2 Apex talent had its damage nerfed, but its duration increased. They'll also see a blanket damage buff across the board of 4%. Star Surge and Starfall damage saw a 10% buff on top. And then Rejuvenation, Wild Growth, and Regrowth healing all got 25% buffs. Celestial Fire was buffed up to a 10% damage bonus, Orbit Breaker effectiveness was reduced to 50%, Touch of the Cosmos chance to trigger was reduced for both Wrath and Starfire, Total Eclipse chance to trigger was buffed up to 15 and 30%, up from 10 and 20%, Sculpt the Stars and Astral Communion swap places in the talent tree, and Sculpt the Stars reduces Eclipse cooldown by 3 seconds, up from 2. And then to round out the balance changes, Elun's Chosen Lunar Calling was nerfed slightly, and a few hero talents in the Keeper of the Grove tree were nerfed as well. Feral Druids have quite a few changes too. Saber Jaw's damage bonus was increased to 60% per point, Focused Frenzy damage bonus was nerfed down to 15%, Rip and Tear damage bonus was increased up to 20%, and Chomp damage saw a 30% buff. Apex Predator's Craving base chance to trigger was reduced down to 4%, and then Rejuvenation, Wild Growth, and Regrowth healing all saw 25% buffs. Resto Druids are up next, and they have a bunch of updates. There's a new talent that causes Nature's Swiftness to let Regrowth apply pretty much all of your heal over time effects. Flash of Clarity is a new talent that causes Omen of Clarity to increase Regrowth healing by 40%. Innovate has been redesigned to grant 25% of the target's max mana over 8 seconds, instead of just making spells free to cast, which should be far easier to make good use of. Abundance has been redesigned to have a hard cutoff point for rejuvenations, so at 5 rejuvenations, Regrowth gets 50% crit strike chance and 50% reduced mana cost. Tranquility has been updated to grant you an Absorb shield that also prevents knockbacks, so you just root yourself to the ground during Tranquility. Incarnation Tree of Life now casts Regrowth onto up to 3 nearby injured allies when you initially shapeshift. Swift Mend healing is now increased by 40% of the consumed heal over time effect, and Everbloom rank 3's heal effect now triggers when you press Swift Mend instead of Soul of the Forest. Verdant Infusion no longer extends heal over time effects, Germination no longer increases Rejuvenation's duration, and Ysera's Gift now transfers any overhealing to a nearby ally. In addition to all of that, all spell and ability healing was increased by 6%, Wild Growth healing saw a 20% buff, but its mana cost was increased by 15%, Verdancy healing was increased by 40%, Rejuvenation and Regrowth mana costs were reduced by 10%, Life Bloom mana cost was cut down by 20%, Passing Seasons reduces Nature's Swiftness cooldown by 3 extra seconds, seconds, a couple of talents were removed, and some talents have shifted around in the talent tree. So a lot of changes for Restoration Druid as we head into patch 12.1. And then we round out the Druid changes with Guardian. Gory Fur has been redesigned so that Iron Fur has a chance to make your next Maul, Raze, or Ravage free, while Maul, Raze, and Ravage have a chance to make your next Iron Fur free. The Apex talents have been redesigned to give you a chance to summon a Guardian Spirit whenever you spend Rage. The Spirits reset the cooldown on Thrash and Mangle, and when you use Berserk or Incarn, your next 2 Mauls are guaranteed to spawn a Spirit. Hopefully this makes the Apex talent worth taking in most cases, unlike the original iteration. Bramble's Absorb was increased by 25%, after the Wildfire Healing was buffed by 25%, Ursoc's Fury was buffed up to 35% of Thrash and Maul damage, Elune's Favored heals you for 18% of arcane damage dealt, up from 15%, Lunar Beam Healing was increased by 25%, and Lunation reduces Lunar Beam's cooldown by a flat 20 seconds instead of 3 seconds per arcane ability. Elune's Chosen Boundless Moonlight also saw a buff that now causes you to leech 12% of damage dealt, up from 10%. So a lot of buffs for self-sustain and absorb shields, and hopefully an actually useful Apex talent moving forward. Evokers are up next, and Augmentation only has a couple of changes. Upheavals cast by duplicates no longer knock enemies into the air, which means less free knockups, but also more reliable knockups. Living Flame Healing, Verdant's Embrace Healing, and Emerald Blossom Healing were all increased by 25%, so they do seem to want to up the healing potential of hybrid specs across the board by the looks of things. And then for Chrono Warden, the additional stats from Ebonmite crits now last for 15 seconds, modified by Mastery, instead of the entire Ebonmite duration. For Devastation, the rank 3 Apex talent is being redesigned to give you a new spell, Unbound Flame, that you can cast up to 4 times before Dragon Rage finishes its cooldown. That spell deals AoE damage and grants 1 Essence Burst. Tyranny has been updated to now work with Unbound Flame, so it always benefits from your max mastery bonus. Living Flame, Verdant Embrace, and Emerald Blossom Healing were all buffed, and Risen Fury has been removed. And then for Preservation, Marithra's Blessing has been updated to increase Dream Breath healing by 60%, down from 250%, but the bonus now applies to the heal over time portion of the spell as well. Font of Magic has been updated to reduce the empower time of Dream Breath and Fire Breath by 20%. Dream Breath instant healing saw a 50% nerf, but its periodic healing was increased by 118%, so that should offer you a stronger heal over time option instead. And then Temporal Barrier absorption was increased by 30%. Then we come to the Hunters, and they're starting out strong with a ranged auto-shot damage buff of 600%, so that should do more than just tickle your target now. And then Hunter's Mark can now be applied to up to 5 targets at a time instead of 1, which lets you mark priority adds in raid encounters without it dropping off the boss. This also lets you mark multiple targets in dungeon packs, which can actually lead you to spending 5 globals before you get to deal any damage. So hopefully something changes here to streamline that process. For Dark Ranger, Bleak Arrow's damage will see a 300% buff, and Withering Fire's Black Arrow damage was reduced by 40%. For Beast Mastery specifically, they'll see a lot of damage boosts to help their damage outside of Bestial Wrath windows. Heart of the Pack was renamed to Razor Sharp, and it's been redesigned to increase the damage of your pet's Bite, Claw, and Smack by 100%. Piercing Fangs now increases the crit damage of Kill Command by 15%. Bloody Frenzy now reduces Barbed Shot's periodic rate increase by 33% instead of 50%. Kill Cleave was nerfed so it only cleaves 20% of Kill Command's damage, down from 40%. And then Barbed Shot damage was buffed up by 25%. Kill Command and Cobra Shot damage saw a 20% increase, Beast Cleave's duration was extended by 2 seconds, Dire Beast summons can now be tracked on the cooldown manager, and Wild Instincts has been removed. So it should be easier to maintain Beast Cleave, and a lot of abilities will deal more damage baseline. Marksmanship is one of the specs with larger changes in the new patch, mostly due to the previous rework not sticking the landing. Explosive Shot has been redesigned into a damage over time effect that deals AoE damage every time it ticks, so it's more like the old survival Explosive Shot from way back in the day. There's a new talent that lets you fire Explosive Shot again right away. Multiple talents have been updated to extend the duration of Explosive Shot or reduce its cooldown. The rank 2 Apex talent was updated to increase your crit strike damage damage and ranged ability damage, and the rank 3 Apex talent now increases the damage of aim shot and rapid fire instead of just aim shot. Bullet Storm has been changed, so rapid fire now increases the damage of your next aim shot. Incendiary ammunition now causes Bullet Storm to affect your next 2 aim shots. Death Blow has been updated, so you know exactly when it's going to proc. Aspect of the Hydra no longer causes arcane shot to cleave, and then aim shot, rapid fire, arcane shot, multi-shot, and kill shot damage all saw 20% buffs. Eagle's Accuracy is now a 1-point talent that increases the damage of aim shot by 5% down from 10%, and rapid fire by 10% down from 20%. Focused aim was nerfed to a 1-second cooldown reduction, double tap and headshot were both removed, and aim shot has a new icon. It will be interesting to see how this damage over time explosive shot works and if it helps the spec feel smooth and cohesive in the new patch. That's not all though. Dark Ranger's Through the Eyes has been redesigned, Black Arrow no longer highlights itself whenever it's available, Black Arrow direct damage was cut down by 40%, Ebon Bowstring now causes Black Arrow to have a chance to cause your next aim shot to grant the death blow effect, and Dark Minion summons can now be tracked on the cooldown manager. For Sentinel, Moon's Blessing reduces the cooldown of aim shot by 1 second down from 2. And then Survival hasn't been entirely left out, though it's not quite as exciting as the other spec changes. There's a new talent that increases the crit chance and crit damage of Raptor Strike, Raptor Swipe, and Kill Command. Primal Surge has moved up in the talent tree, and Shower of Blood has been removed. For Sentinel, Lethal Barbs has been updated to give auto attacks a high chance to generate 3 focus rather than every attack generating 1 focus, and then Scout's Vigil no longer increases stealth detection radius while using camouflage. Very exciting changes indeed. Moving on, we have the Mages, who will see some decent survivability buffs. There's a new talent that reduces AoE damage taken by 4%, which is always going to be nice. Improved Prismatic Barrier has been updated to grant an additional charge of your shields, so both Arcane and Fire will get that extra charge now, and then Temporal Realignment now immediately heals 20% of your health and 30% extra over 6 seconds. There are also a lot of updates for Sun Fury. We'll only have 3 orbs now, but you can buff those 3 orbs instead of just being able to get a couple extra. Mana Cascade is now uncapped, and several hero talents that grant the buff have been updated. For Arcane, their Apex talent is being redesigned into Prismatic Bolt. Arcane Barrage has a chance per Arcane Salvo stack consumed to trigger Prismatic Bolt, which deals damage to your target and nearby enemies and generates 4 Arcane charges. Arcane Pulse has been changed to now have a cooldown, a larger radius, and generate 1 charge per target hit. Expanded Mind causes Prismatic Bolt to grant 4 stacks of Arcane Salvo. A few talents no longer interact with Arcane Pulse, and Touch of the Archmage has been removed. Fire has a few updates too. Pyroblast damage and Flame Strike damage saw 15% buffs, and the Apex talent has been adjusted so that rank 1 increases fire damage by 2% for 8 seconds, down from 4% for 12 seconds. Rank 2 now increases fire damage by 5 and 10%, up from 3 and 6%, and rank 3's chance to trigger during combustion was reduced. And then we come to Frost, who no longer get the extra charge of Ice Barrier all by themselves, as that's now a baseline function. They'll see a 4% damage boost across the board, but their rank 2 Apex talent spell damage bonus was cut in half. Monks are up next with a couple of general changes. Chi Transfer now causes Touch of Death to heal you for 60% of damage dealt, up from 50%, and Vigorous Expulsion increases Expel Harm's healing by 6%, up from 5%. For Brewmaster, Stagger Reduction from Staggering Strikes was increased by 25%, Spirit of the Ox chance to generate a Healing Sphere was increased by 20%, Celestial Brew and Celestial Fusion absorbs were increased by 25%, Awakening Spirit's max absorb value saw a 25% buff, Vital Flame heals for 50% of damage dealt, up from 40%, and a few more buffs were added into the cooldown manager. For Mistweaver, there's a new talent that increases Soothing Mist's healing by 300%, but increases its mana cost as well. They'll see a 3% nerf to all healing done, a 50% boost to their mastery, a 15% nerf to Spinning Crane kick damage. Way of the Crane now transfers 280% of damage done, down from 340%, and then Jadefire Teachings now increases Ancient Teachings transfer amount by 320%, up from 270%. So some give and take for the Mistweavers so far in patch 12.1. Windwalkers haven't been left out, they'll see a 30% damage boost to auto attacks and Zenith Stomp damage, Blackout Kick damage is up 50%, Tiger Palm saw a huge 200% damage buff, and Dual Threat damage was increased by 30%. Weapon of Wind was nerfed down to a 5% bonus, and Tiger Eye Bruise crit strike damage bonus was cut down to 5 and 10%, down from 10 and 20%. And then Vivify Healing saw a 25% buff. For Conduit of the Celestials, Celestial Conduit damage will see a 25% nerf, and Temple Training increases the damage of Fist of Fury and Spinning Crane Kick by 30%, up from 10%. So a lot of damage boosts for your main rotational abilities to look forward to. Paladins have a lot of changes to look forward to as well. Golden Path, Lightforged Blessing, Brought to Light, and Lightsmith Rite of Adjuration healing were all increased by 25%. For protection, they're going to see some big buffs. There's a new talent that lets Word of Glory's overhealing to be applied as an absorb shield, so you could potentially end up with some big bubbles as a prop paladin. Improved Ardent Defender now increases max health by 20% while active, and no longer cancels the remaining duration if you take fatal damage. Seal of Reprisal now causes Blessed Hammer to reduce enemy damage taken by 10% for 8 seconds. Masterwork was updated, so after you cast a Holy Armament, your Crusader Strike or replacement ability will bestow a lesser version to a nearby ally, and then we have some huge damage buffs and nerfs. Judgment and Consecration damage are up 100%, Shield of the Righteous is getting a 150% buff, Hammer of the Righteous primary damage is up 50%, Avenging Wrath now increases damage, healing, and crit strike chance by 10% baseline, Avenger's Shield is getting a 30% buff, and lesser weapon damage was increased by 50%. Hammer of Light and Empyrean Hammer damage will catch a 33% nerf, Divine Exactions Divine Toll effectiveness was cut down to 80% from 150%, and Sentinel's duration was increased up to 20 seconds. Undying Embers was buffed up to 125%, Bulwark of Order Absorb Shield was increased to 75% of damage done, Solace causes Consecration to heal you for 375% of the damage it deals, which will be buffed even further by the Consecration damage buff from earlier. Glory of the Vanguard now deals damage as a percentage of a vendor's shield initial damage, Sentinel has been moved and it now inherits the crit strike bonus of Avenging Wrath, and Sanctified Wrath has been removed. So you no longer have to choose between Sanctified Wrath and Sentinel, you'll have way more damage baseline and more self-sustain on top of everything else. So some huge changes for prop paladins in this patch. That's not all though, Retribution also has some pretty significant changes. The Apex talent was updated to let Art of War and Righteous Cause stack twice, so you don't have to worry about spending those quite as quickly and you'll lose fewer procs. Art of War now increases Blade of Justice's damage by 80% down from 150%, so that's a pretty big nerf, but then Blade of Justice base damage is being increased by 40%. Final Verdict and Divine Storm damage will see 15% buffs, Avenging Wrath damage bonus and crit strike chance bonus were reduced down to 15%, but then Templar Strike, Templar Slash, Judgment, and Hammer of Wrath will all see 50% buffs. Divine Toll's Judgment now deals 50% increased damage down from 100%, and the rank 3 Apex talent saw a 25% damage nerf. Flash of Light, Word of Glory, and Eternal Flame healing were all increased by 25%, Art of War no longer activates from additional Sky Fury attacks, Crusading Strikes now increases auto attack speed by 15% instead of decreasing it by 20%, so that's going to be pretty huge, and then Execution Sentence area of effect radius was increased. Then there are some quick changes to Templar. Hammer of Light damage saw a 30% nerf, but it now only costs 3 holy power down from 5, so that's going to be interesting to get used to, but we have a lot of changes for Retribution which should lead to smoother damage overall, less burst damage from cooldowns, and the Apex talent will be a bit easier to use. Then we come to the priests, starting with Discipline. There's a new talent that increases the healing of Shadow Mend and lets it apply a longer atonement effect. Flash Heal will just now passively be Shadow Mend. Mind Blast now always upgrades your next Power Word shield into Void Shield, but Void Shield now reflects 15% of damage taken down from 25%. Your Apex talent can now accumulate up to 2 charges, which sounds quite powerful. Flash Healing will see a 25% buff. Smite damage is increased by 40%. Inescape Inescapable Torment damage was nerfed by 30%, Penance no longer applies Atonement when cast on an ally, and Greater Smite is now a 1-point talent. For Oracle, Unfolding Vision has been redesigned, Void Weaver's Void Blast damage is increased by 25%, Void Wraith damage was buffed by 30%, and Void Infusion now increases Atonement healing from Void Blast and Penance by 75% while your Rift is active, up from 50%. Now, Holy doesn't have too much going on so far in the patch. They'll see a slight change to Resonant Energy in the Archon hero talent tree, and Divine Hymn has been updated to grant Guardian Spirit while you channel it, so at least you shouldn't die quite as often while trying to keep everyone else alive. It's interesting that Druids get an Absorb Shield and Knockback immunity, while Priests get a lethal damage protection spell. I'd probably prefer the Druid Tranquility change, but what do you think will be more valuable? Let me know in the comments section below. And then Shadow has quite a few changes coming their way. There's a new talent that causes shadowy apparitions to explode when they reach their target, which sounds really cool. Improved Void Form now causes Void Form to increase your spell damage and grant 2 additional uses of Void Volley. Ancient Madness has been redesigned to give you stacks of a haste buff that linger after Void Form ends, and you can only use Void Volley a certain number of times during each Void Form, and then Power Word Shield saw a 25% buff. There are also a couple of quick changes for the Archon hero talent tree, so you won't be quite as reliant on Psychic Link for your cleave and AoE damage, and Exploding Spirits sounds really fun. Now, rogues actually have quite a few updates in this patch, which may surprise many of the rogues out there. Thistle Tea is now a choice talent, letting you choose between it automatically activating at low energy or giving you an ability you can cast actively. Atrophic Poison now reduces damage dealt by 4% up from 3%, and its duration was increased to 60 seconds up from 10. For Fatebound, Deal Fate now has a 60% chance to grant an extra combo point when you seal Fate, down from 100%. For Assassination, there's a new talent that increases Envenom damage but reduces its duration. Your rank 1 Apex talent has been updated to increase Envenom damage and restore energy for each combo point spent. Internal Bleeding now triggers from casting Kidney Shot and Rupture, rather than also being applied when copying Ruptures with Crimson Tempest. Iron Wire now causes Garrote from stealth to silence targets for 5 seconds. Dashing Scoundrel was buffed up to a 10% crit chance bonus. They'll see a 3% damage boost across the board. Deathmark was reduced to a 75% damage boost, Kingsbane damage saw a 15% nerf, Shrouded Suffocation got buffed up to 30%, Avulsion increases rupture damage by 25%, Motivated Murderer energy was increased to 30%, and Rapid Injections damage bonus was buffed up to 20 and 40%. Venomous Wounds generates more energy when multiple targets are affected by your bleeds, Blindside's chance to trigger was reduced to 10 and 20%, Deadly Momentum was removed, and several talents have shifted around in the talent tree. For Outlaw, Improved Between the Eyes was reduced to 2.5 times normal damage, down from 3 times. Fast Action has been updated to reduce the cooldown of Between the Eyes by 8 seconds, up from 5, and increases the damage bonus from each stack by 1%. Killing Spree damage was increased by 60%, Heavy Hitter was buffed up to a 15 and 30% bonus, Zero In value per stack was reduced to 2%, Hidden Opportunities chance for ambush to grant opportunity was increased to 100% of the chance for Sinister Strikes chance, and then there are new connections in the talent tree to help you pick and choose talents more freely. And then for sub-rogues, Relentless Strikes was nerfed down to 4 energy per combo point spent, Shadowcraft no longer stores 1 additional combo point, but the frequency bonus from auto attacks was almost doubled, Lingering Shadow now also applies to Shuriken Storm, and your Apex talent now considers the total damage of Secret Technique instead of only the initial hit. Moving on, we have the Shamans. For Farseer, Chain Lightning now hits up to 5 targets, up from 3. Lava Burst now also increases damage by a % equal to your crit strike chance. For Elemental, a lot of damage is being taken out of your Ascendance windows and put into your standard rotation. Power of the Maelstrom now gives Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning a chance to cause your next Lava Burst to deal 20% increased damage, stacking up to 2 times, and Lava Burst consumes 1 stack at a time. Stormkeeper now affects your next 2 Lightning Bolts or 2 Chain Lightnings, and they cause an Elemental Overload on all targets hit. Lava Burst and Lightning Bolt damage are buffed by 30%, Chain Lightning and Flame Shock damage up 60%, Tempest direct damage was buffed by 20%, and then Healing Surge, Earth Shield, and Healing Stream Totem also a 25% boost to their healing. Ascendance now increases the damage of Overmental Overload by 30% down from 75%. Bonus lava bursts when activating Ascendance are now 50% of their normal value down from 100%, and Molten Wrath now increases the damage of lava burst by 10% down from 15%. The Apex talent rank 1 now increases Elemental Overload damage by 10% down from 35%, but now also increases elemental damage by 10%. The rank 2 was nerfed down to a 15 and 30% bonus to crit damage down from 25 and 50%, and Elemental Blast casts from Fusion of the Elements now only grants 40% of the normal duration of your stats buff down from 100%. And then for Stormbringer, Supercharge now causes Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, and Tempest Overloads to deal 10% additional damage. So Ascendance might not be quite as fun to push, but your damage profile should be smoother overall. Now Enhancement doesn't really have much going on, they just get the hybrid heal boosts to Healing Surge, Earth Shield, and Healing Stream Totem, and then Resto has been more or less left out too. Healing Rain now has a 12-second cooldown and 18-second duration, so you can move it around easier. That's all for now. Warlocks are up next, and I'm very surprised to say they have the least changes out of any class so far in patch 12.1. Hellcaller's Blackened Soul and Mark of Perathon have been redesigned, and Destruction's Conflagration of Chaos now causes Conflagrate and Shadowburn to always crit, and the damage is increased by your crit chance. And that's it. And then last but not least we come to the Warriors. Rend is being given back to Arms Warriors exclusively as an ability and will be single target only, but Cleave will still apply Rend to all targets hit. Storm of Blood causes Whirlwind to apply Rend to all targets hit for Fury, and Blood and Thunder causes Thunderclap to apply Rend to all targets hit for protection. It seems like a bit of a weird switch around that ultimately doesn't really change anything. For Arms, Ravager has been updated to deal more damage. It no longer increases Cleave or Whirlwind damage and instead causes all enemies to take extra damage from your bleed effects for its duration, and its duration is no longer affected by haste. Bloodletting has been updated to give you extra crit chance against targets affected by Rend, and Mortal Strike inflicts Rend on targets below 35% health. Broad Strokes has been updated so Colossus Smash now grants 6 stacks of Sweeping Strikes or Noose, and a couple talents have shifted around in the talent tree. For Colossus, Tide of Battle increases the damage of Overpower and Execute instead of just Overpower. Demolish's cooldown was reduced to 30 seconds baseline, but Dominance of the Colossus no longer reduces the cooldown of Demolish. For Fury Warrior, Whirlwind has been updated to now generate 3 rage, improved Whirlwind now just increases rage generated per target hit, and there's a new talent that increases Whirlwind's damage when it only hits one target. Rampaging Ruin has been redesigned to deal AoE damage when improved Whirlwind is active, and Hack and Slash was updated to give Rampage a 75% chance to refund a charge of Raging Blow and increase the damage of your next Raging Blow by 20%. For Mountain Thane, Thunderblast damage was buffed by 40%, but Crashing Thunder's damage boost was nerfed down to 10%. And then we come to Protection Warriors. Devastating Focus has been updated to also increase the damage of Execute. Bloodborne now increases all bleed damage. Fueled by Violence was buffed up to 125%. Ignore Pain Absorb was buffed by 25%. Brutal Vitality adds 10% of damage dealt to Ignore Pain up from 8%. And Ravager will see the same updates that Arms Warrior got. Protection will also get all of the changes for both hero talent trees that we already went over. So as you can see, we have an enormous amount of class changes planned for 12.1, and this is just the very first build. As the PTR unfolds and more builds get pushed through, we're sure to see even more tweaks and tuning, so if your class didn't get much in this first round, there's still plenty of time for changes to make their way into the patch. What do you think of the changes to your class and spec from what you've seen so far? Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Now that's all for the class changes coming in 12.1, but that only scratches the surface of what this new patch has to offer. We'll get a whole new zone to explore, new seasonal content, massive changes to gearing up, raid loot saw some big buffs, solo content players have more content than ever, and there are a bunch of quality of life updates too. If you want to check out the patch in more detail, I'll leave a link to our full preview video in the comments section below. Now in other news, we do have a couple of important updates for the live game in patch 12.07. To start with, the Umbral Champion mount has finally been revealed. This is the mount you can earn if you end the season in the top 1% of Mythic Plus players. It's a dark red recolor of the Mythic March on Keldanas Phoenix mount, and it looks pretty awesome. I might actually push some keys to see how close I can get to this reward. If you're ever curious about what rating you would have to reach to be in the running, you can pop by Raider.io and check out their season ratings cutoff page. As of writing this video, NA Realms 1% currently sits just under 3,800 rating, and EU Realms sit at just over 3,850 rating. That's only going to go up as we get closer to the end of the season, so you'll probably need to time at least every key on plus 20 or thereabouts if you want a chance of obtaining this shiny new mount. If you'd rather spend your time gearing up your ults and farming the patch 12.07 zones, I have some good news for you. All rares will now be immune to damage for 3 minutes after they spawn, giving you plenty of time to cross the zone to reach any rare on the map before they get absolutely obliterated. With rares offering some of the best catch-up rewards in the patch, this should make gearing up easier and faster for all players. And then the last little bit of news we have for this week is for the new sporefall raid. The mythic version of the Rotmire encounter being flexible wasn't the only change to mythic difficulty. It also doesn't have a standard mythic lockout. That means you can go in as many times as you want and kill the boss over and over and over again to help out your friends or guildies. Now you only get one chance at loot for your very first kill, so you may be wondering, why would anyone even bother? And that's where bonus rolls come in. Because you can kill the boss repeatedly, you can actually roll on the boss as many times as you want within a week, as long as you have the bonus rolls to spend. Using 2 Void Core bonus rolls guarantees you a piece of gear, and with the duplicate protection actually working nowadays, you won't ever see the same piece twice. That means if you have enough bonus rolls, you could theoretically get every single piece of loot from Rotmire in 1 week, giving you an insane item level advantage. And that's what some players have been doing. The only problem is that this wasn't really available for any other mythic boss due to the mythic lockout changes, so it wasn't clear if this was intended, or if those players would end up getting rolled back or receiving some kind of punishment. But the dev team took to the forums to confirm that there are no current plans to change Sporefall's loot lockout, and players are free to use multiple bonus rolls on repeat attempts for this encounter. So we have a blue post to confirm that you can roll as many times as you want to get that shiny 298 gear. But that's all of the updates we have so far, so that's it for this week's WoW News video. What do you think of the huge round of class changes slated for patch 12.1? And how do you feel about certain specs getting reworked yet again? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to all of our members here on YouTube. You can see their names on screen. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can find links in the description or click the join button just below the video. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful in any way, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you're always kept up to date. Thanks for watching, folks, good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.